if I told you your biggest leadership breakthrough isn't hidden in a business strategy? It's in the mirror. I'm Myles Threatt. Thank you for joining me today for Legacy Leaders Lounge. And I help ambitious leaders just like you build a lasting legacy no matter where you're at in your leadership journey. And today I'm going to show you why the world's most effective leaders aren't just watching their teams, they're watching themselves. See, leadership begins with self-awareness. Before you can lead others, you got to know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to understand and know those around you. Now you might be wondering, how do I know all this about self-awareness? Well, sometimes the best leadership lessons come when you're furthest from your comfort zone. And early in my career, I got way outside my comfort zone. You see, there's a reason why 85% of low-performing leaders all have one thing in common. And I discovered that 8,000 miles from home. You see, it started when I began my nonprofit Christian mission work in Thailand. See, that experience opened up a new door of self-awareness for me. I mean, I thought at that point I kind of knew and understood myself a little bit, or at least I thought I knew myself. But I realized being placed in a cross-cultural setting, completely foreign and unknown, new, totally different than the way I grew up in the area I grew up in the U.S. in my life, that I learned a lot of new things about myself that I didn't know until I got exposed to a variety of different experiences that took me way outside my normal comfort zone. See, when you're placed in that new and different setting, your eyes are opened up. You start to experience life and circumstances and situations in a different way. And they have different meaning for the people that surround you. And they interpret it in a different way. And you just don't understand. You just don't get it until you've been placed in that situation. And those experiences help you see things about yourself that you really never realized was there. And you learn some good things about yourself. I was able to make adjustments and changes to how I interact with people and how I communicate, and understood new things about my body language and what it means and how it's interpreted in a different cultural setting. And I learned to behave and act in a new way so that I communicated more effectively and clearly, not only through words, language that I was learning for the first time, but also through my body language and my tone and intonation and facial expressions and so many things that went into communication. I was enjoying getting to know these people, learning their culture, learning their language, experiencing life there. I was having fun with it. But I also saw some things about myself that I didn't like. I saw some of my ugliness that needed to change and was being exposed for the first time because I was outside of my comfort zone. I was seeing things from a new perspective, from a different angle that I had never been exposed to in my life. And I can imagine that maybe you have been placed in circumstances and situations that took you outside your comfort zone. And I bet you learned some really good things about yourself, and at the same time you experienced some really bad things and learned some ugly things about yourself at the same time. You see, before I left and went overseas to Thailand, I had a leader of another nonprofit organization stop and talk to me before I was getting ready to leave. It was probably a week or two before I was getting ready to travel, move to Thailand completely. It was a short conversation, really and truly. This leader told me, he says, somewhere around the 6 months mark, you're going to hit something that's called, and he referred to it as the brick wall. You're going to hit a brick wall. And that brick wall was a combination of a lot of different things. It was a combination of being outside my comfort zone, living in a new culture. All the newness had wore off, and you're living with the stress and the burnout and a new climate and a new way of doing life and trying to survive and trying to figure out how to do basic things that you can do every day of the week, any given time of the day in your home country that are super easy for you to do. And now they're complicated beyond measure, and they shouldn't be, and doing little things like going to trying to figure out how to pay your bills. It was a pain in the ass at times, all right? It was difficult. It was challenging. And the pressure of it all was just like came right to head, and I hit the brick wall. And for me, it was like I was realizing that, all right, you're at this point. What are you going to do, Myles? Are you going to move forward, or are you going to let it stop you? Are you going to make some adjustments and changes and continue to adapt more in this situation so that you can move forward, or are you going to stop and all progress is going to stop for you? You see, that's what happens when you become self-aware. You become self-aware and you realize, hey, this thing in my life right now, it is keeping me from reaching that next level. It is keeping me from progressing where I need to progress to, so I can be the person I was designed to be. So I can be the leader I'm designed to be in this situation. And you're going to face that. So when you face that brick wall and you come to it and you're aware that, hey, I've got some character traits, I've got some communication issues, I've got some deep, dark secrets that I need to deal with right now. Because if I don't, I'm not going to progress. And the self-aware person is going to make a decision to move forward and deal with it in their life. The person that lacks self-awareness is going to be in denial and they're going to stay there. And I've seen both. I've experienced for myself what it's like and what I have to move through, and I've seen others go into denial. You see, if you really want to lead well, you need to take a really good look in the mirror and truly know yourself. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. You need to do your own personal SWOT analysis about yourself. You've got to understand your origin story and how it made you who you are. Those weaknesses and challenges that you consistently have to deal with and you face because of that origin story are going to lead you. See, your origin story establishes that narrative to your identity and becomes the motivation, drives who you are today. It is that story that's made you the reluctant hero you are today. Do yourself and those you lead a favor and get to know yourself. Write out and share your origin story. That experience in Thailand taught me something powerful about leadership. It's a lot like nature. In fact, let me share a visualization that changed the way I coach leaders forever. Imagine your leadership is like a tree, and what's visible isn't what makes you strong. See, self-awareness is your ability to recognize your emotions, values, strengths, and weaknesses, and how they influence your thoughts and actions. It's about taking a deep, honest look at who you are and how you show up as a leader. So I want you to think about that tree. Let's just say it's a massive, big, beautiful oak tree. You see all the limbs, branches, and the trunk, and it looks so strong. The thing you don't see is that underlying root structure. There's a massive root structure under that tree. Provides all of its nourishment, and it's a support structure. Without that root structure, it's going to die, it's going to fall over. That root system of that tree is like your origin story for yourself. It's that story of your whole life. And there are a lot of things that happened in your life that have made a major influence into who you are. And it's that origin story. It's your root system. It's the root system of that tree. And that trunk, that's made up of thoughts, your values, your strengths, your weaknesses. And those branches and leaves, that's your emotions and your actions. So I want you to think for a moment. Go back to a recent emotion you felt or action you produced. And maybe an action you produced you weren't too pleased with or excited about. Or maybe an emotion you had and you're like, where did that come from? Go back to that moment. You see, that emotion or action and follow it back. Just like those emotion actions are the branches and leaves, those emotions and actions you just had. Go back to that trunk. What were the thoughts going on? How did it relate to any of your values? Did it have to do with any of your strengths or your weaknesses? Then after you make that assessment, go back a little bit more. Go back to that root system. Go back to your story. What are some of the things that might have happened in your life that led to that thought that produced that action? Or maybe it led to that weakness or strength that led to that emotion. What is it from that origin story that produced some of the values you hold today? How do they relate to your emotions or your actions? You see, if you get back to that origin story, you can leverage that for good in your life, for good for other people. Because there are things about your story that can benefit other people. Or you can let that story destroy you as well. But leverage it for good. See how you can use it to help other people, because your story has value, not only for you and your self-awareness and your development, but for others as well. Now that you understand the tree of leadership, let me show you what happens when someone actually applies this knowledge. I work with a leader who understood just how powerful this concept can be. We're going to call her Kiara. That's not her real name. And she worked for this large manufacturing company in her hometown, and everybody knew her. And everyone from that area that worked at that facility knew a lot about her and her story and her family, because her family was known and her story was just kind of out there for everybody. And the reality was that most of the people knew too much about her story and her life. And during our coaching sessions, Kiara talked more and more about her long-term dreams. And part of that dream was for her to leave the area she grew up in and relocate near her daughter, who was getting married and most recently had a grandbaby and everything. She knew that eventually she wanted to get away from her hometown and relocate and be near her daughter, be near her grandchild. And there were no opportunities happening for her at this place she was working at. And she was working hard. She was doing good things. She just never got the recognition she deserved. And people always looked down upon her because of her story. Some of it, she kept too much of her story out there for people to know, in my opinion. But we began working on creating a plan for her to leave and build this life that she wanted to build. But she also realized she needed to make a lot of changes. And she did. She made some huge changes, life altering. Some things that was hid that other people didn't know about. She was dealing with a major addiction that no one knew about. And yet she was willing to make the change. She did the hard work, and she began putting things in place with her career. She was taking advantage of the opportunities that was given to her work to develop and grow. And it was through all those changes that she was making that she began to realize that she had more to offer, that she could do more than was being required of her, and wanted to do more. And even though the opportunities weren't being made available to her, she was still being looked over. And so when the time was right and she had done all the work, she began making the next steps, create that life that she wanted to have. And she's created it for herself. And she's making it happen for herself. But it took her becoming more self-aware of herself and being willing to deal with some of the difficult things in her life. It didn't change how people viewed her a lot and still kept her held back where she was at. But that didn't stop her. She knew, because she put in the work, that next step that she was going to take about leaving and getting out of there and creating the life that she wanted to live in this new location. And she made it happen for herself. And because her self-awareness grew so much, she was free to step out of her old life and step into this new opportunity because she had put in the work. Kiara's story shows us what's possible, but you might be thinking, Myles, this sounds great, but how do I actually do this? Well, I've developed a 4-step process that any leader can start using today. Let me show you the 4-step process that's transformed hundreds of leaders. It starts with you writing out your origin story. You need to take some time to write out events and experiences that most shaped your life before you were 18 to 20 years old. Go back and record what was some of the biggest influences from those moments in your life. Some of those stories may not be pretty stories, but they're moments that have made a major influence in your life. And you need to go back to them and write them out. After you write out your origin story, spend some time just reflecting about those influential moments and how they made who you are today and how you act and react to different circumstances and situations and the emotions you produce due to those experiences. Let's spend some time reflecting on that and document that as well. Second thing you need to do is daily reflection. Spend some time at the end of each day reflecting on what went well and what can you do, what can you improve on. Reflect on those two things on a regular basis to help you understand yourself better. Third step is to seek feedback. Ask for feedback from trusted peers or friends, colleagues, mentors to give their perspective on your leadership style. And the final thing you need to do is use an assessment tool, like to measure your emotional intelligence or do a personal inventory like DISC or Myers-Briggs that will give you more insights into your natural tendencies. So you can build more self-awareness as long as you're willing to put in the work. So doing these few things that I recommended will help you learn and discover more about yourself. But as you learn and discover, you've got to apply what you learn and discover as well. And some of that part of that origin story and digging into your past and your childhood, especially if you've had harmful, hurtful things to happen to you, might not be that enjoyable, but your past doesn't define you. It's what you do with it and how you use it and leverage that to help you be that reluctant hero that helps other people. These tools are powerful, but they only work if you're willing to face what you find. Let me share a story that shows you exactly what happens when a leader refuses to look in that mirror. These are the red flags that scream leadership blind spot. During my time leading a nonprofit team in Thailand, I had one person on my team that was super controlling, and boy could they stonewall progress in a meeting by trying to get their way. It was a pain in the ass, let's just say that. And it came to head one time over the most insignificant decision. And really and truly, we all as a team had had enough. And several people in the group confronted this individual about their controlling nature. And others at different points in time from working with them had tried to confront them and talk to them about it and not get anywhere. When we all had finally had enough, we all decided to confront this individual as a group about their controlling nature. They went in complete denial. They are not that way. It didn't matter if we all said it to them, if you tried to say it to them, give them feedback one-on-one. They just could not receive it. And the more examples they gave, as we gave to try to point it out, to try to help them see, and the more people tried to explain their experience with them, the more this individual continued to deny. Needless to say, we never got anywhere with this person. Eventually they ended up leaving the team, which in the long run was the best thing, because we weren't getting anywhere. And the reality was, they didn't have any real self-awareness. And we eventually learned that others who had worked with them in the past had very similar experiences with them. And I tell you this story to help you see that the feedback you receive is a key insight for you becoming more self-aware. You see, one of the most dangerous leadership traps is thinking that you don't have one. We all have weaknesses. We all have things we need to be working on. And there's some feedback you've received that you need to take to heart and make a change. Make that change for yourself, because it will benefit you in the long run. Now that you know both the pathways and the pitfalls of self-awareness, there's only one question left. What will you discover when you take the first look in the leadership mirror? I hope you found this episode helpful. In the description below, we've got a free PDF for your practical self-awareness toolkit. And if you want to work on becoming a better leader and more self-aware, sign up for your strategy call today in the description below as well. I'm Myles Threatt. Thank you for joining me today for Legacy Leaders Lounge.